Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. Homecoming Shadows. The desert sand of Afghanistan still clung to Major Caesar Chamberlain's boots as he stepped off the military transport at Fort Bragg. 5 tours, 15 years of service, countless nights spent dreaming of home, of his wife Miranda's embrace, of his twin daughters Eleanor and Vivian, who would be 16 now, practically strangers after his extended deployments. Caesar had built his reputation as one of the Army's most ruthless intelligence officers. In the shadowy corners of special operations, his name was whispered with equal parts respect and fear. He never forgave. He never forgot. Every enemy who crossed him learned that lesson too late. The house in Fayetteville looked exactly as he'd left it. White picket fence, manicured lawn, the American dream wrapped in suburban perfection. But something felt wrong. The curtains were drawn differently. A BMW he didn't recognize sat in the driveway next to Miranda's Honda. Inside, the silence was deafening. No excited daughters rushing to greet their father. No wife appearing with tears of joy. Instead, he found a note on the kitchen counter in Miranda's handwriting. At Eleanor's recital. Back late. Dinner in fridge. Eleanor's recital. His daughter played violin, he remembered. But as he checked the calendar, there was no recital marked. No school events. Nothing. Caesar's instincts, honed by years of hunting terrorists in hostile territory, began to whisper warnings. He moved through his own house like an intruder, cataloging every detail that seemed out of place. The family photos had been rearranged. New clothes hung in the closet, expensive brands he'd never bought Miranda. Bills showed purchases at restaurants he'd never heard of, during times when Miranda claimed she was home with the girls. That evening, when Miranda finally returned with Eleanor and Vivian, the reunion felt rehearsed. The girls seemed uncomfortable, barely making eye contact. Miranda's kiss was perfunctory, her smile not reaching her eyes. "How was the recital?" Caesar asked, watching his wife's face carefully. "Beautiful," Miranda replied without hesitation. Eleanor played Vivaldi perfectly, but Eleanor shot a confused glance at her sister. There had been no recital. Over dinner, Caesar observed his family like a foreign intelligence target. The girls spoke in half sentences, their eyes darting between their parents. Miranda dominated the conversation, filling every silence with chatter about neighborhood gossip and school events. She was performing, and not well. "I've been thinking," Miranda said as they cleared the dishes, "maybe we should take a vacation. Just the two of us. The girls could stay with my sister Charlotte in Charlotte." Caesar nodded, filing away another inconsistency. Miranda's sister lived in Raleigh, not Charlotte, and her name was Kristen, not Charlotte. His wife of 16 years was lying about basic family facts. That night, as Miranda slept beside him, Caesar stared at the ceiling and began planning. In his world, there were no coincidences, only patterns waiting to be uncovered. His wife was hiding something, and he intended to find out what. The next morning, he told Miranda he needed to report to base for debriefings that would take several weeks. She seemed relieved, too relieved. As he drove away, he circled back and parked 3 blocks away, positioning himself with a clear view of his house. Within 30 minutes, the BMW returned. A man emerged, tall, dark-haired, moving with the fluid confidence of someone trained in combat. Stuart Ibarra, according to the license plate Caesar ran through military databases. The man kissed Miranda at the door like a lover returning home. Caesar felt the familiar cold rage settle over him, the same ice-water calm that had made him legendary in interrogation rooms from Kabul to Baghdad. But this was different. This was personal. This was betrayal by the person he trusted most in the world. He thought of his daughters, of the uncomfortable way they'd avoided his eyes. How long had this been going on? How much had they been forced to witness? Caesar Chamberlain had never shown mercy to his enemies. He wasn't about to start now. Chapter 2. The Hunter's Web. For 3 weeks, Caesar maintained his facade of regular base duties while conducting the most important surveillance operation of his career. He rented a storage unit across town and filled it with monitoring equipment, cameras, recording devices, tracking systems that made NSA technology look primitive. Stuart Ibarra was no ordinary affair partner. Military records showed he'd been dishonorably discharged from the Marines 5 years ago for undisclosed reasons. His current employment was listed as consultant for a company that existed only on paper. His financials showed income far exceeding what any legitimate consulting work would provide. More disturbing were the patterns Caesar uncovered in his own home. Miranda's computer had been accessed at odd hours. His home office, which he'd assumed was secure, showed signs of methodical searching. Files had been photographed and returned to their exact positions, professional-level intelligence gathering. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Miranda wasn't just cheating. She was operating. Caesar began building his counterintelligence network. First, he reached out to Sergeant Raymond Seymour, a military police investigator who owed him several favors from their time in Iraq. Raymond agreed to run background checks on Stuart Ibarra without asking questions. The results were explosive. Stuart Ibarra had been recruited by a foreign intelligence service, one that had been targeting military families for years. His method was classic: seduce military wives during their husbands' deployments, gain access to homes and information, then disappear when the operation was complete. But Stuart had been with Miranda for over 2 years, according to financial records and surveillance footage from nearby businesses. This wasn't a simple honey trap. This was a long-term intelligence operation, and Miranda was either a willing participant or a compromised asset. Caesar's daughters presented another heartbreaking puzzle. When he followed them after school, he discovered they'd been living with their Aunt Kristen for nearly 6 months. Miranda had been lying about their whereabouts completely. The girls knew about Stuart, but had been sworn to secrecy, trapped between loyalty to their mother and confusion about their father's absence. Eleanor, his eldest by 12 minutes, had begun acting out at school. Her grades had dropped dramatically. Vivian had started seeing the school counselor for anxiety attacks. His daughters were collateral damage in an intelligence operation targeting their father. The scope of the betrayal expanded as Caesar dug deeper. Credit cards he'd never seen showed purchases at electronic stores, photography equipment, and computer hardware. His wife had been equipping a sophisticated surveillance operation using his own military salary. Phone records revealed encrypted communications with numbers traced to foreign countries. Bank accounts had been opened in Miranda's maiden name, Blackwell, with Stuart Ibarra as a joint holder. They weren't just lovers, they were operational partners. But the most damaging discovery came when Caesar accessed his own personnel files through back channels. Someone had been requesting information about his deployments, his security clearance, his operational assignments. The requests had been approved through bureaucratic channels, but they all traced back to documentation that Miranda would have had access to. His wife had been selling him to foreign intelligence for years. The final piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Bobby Stafford, a former colleague now working with military intelligence, called with a warning: "Caesar, we've been tracking communications from your area. Someone's been transmitting classified information. We think there's a cell operating out of Fayetteville." Caesar realized he'd been living with the enemy for half his marriage. That night, he sat in his storage unit command center, surrounded by evidence of the most comprehensive betrayal he'd ever encountered. Photos of Stuart entering his house. Audio recordings of conversations between Miranda and her handler. Financial records showing payments from shell companies. Communications intercepts revealing operational details. His daughters weren't just caught in the middle. They were being used as cover for an intelligence operation. Miranda had weaponized their family, turned their home into a foreign surveillance post, and sold his service record to the highest bidder. Caesar had built his reputation on never forgetting, never forgiving. But this betrayal demanded something more than professional retribution. This demanded complete destruction. He began planning an operation that would make his legendary interrogations look merciful. Chapter 3. Setting the stage. Caesar's revenge began with a single phone call to Raul Gonzalez, his former commanding officer, now working with the Defense Intelligence Agency. The conversation was brief, coded, and resulted in Stuart Ibarra being flagged for immediate surveillance by federal authorities. But Caesar wanted more than Stuart's arrest. He wanted public humiliation, complete exposure, and the kind of systematic destruction that would serve as a warning to anyone who dared target his family. The plan required perfect timing and absolute precision. Caesar began by manipulating Miranda's own operational protocols against her. He planted false information in his home office, fake deployment schedules, fabricated classified documents, and deliberately misleading intelligence reports. When Miranda photographed and transmitted these documents, she was unknowingly feeding disinformation to her foreign contacts. Meanwhile, Caesar quietly gathered his allies. Eddie Ware, a military lawyer specializing in security breaches. Armando Ortega, a federal prosecutor with a perfect conviction record against foreign agents. Kelvin Contreras, a military police colonel who commanded respect throughout the Pentagon. Each man owed Caesar favors from their shared service overseas. Each man understood that betrayal of a fellow soldier demanded the harshest possible response. The divorce papers were filed on a Tuesday morning, precisely calculated to coincide with Miranda's transmission schedule. As she photographed what she believed were Caesar's legal documents, she was actually recording evidence of her own exposure. Miranda's response was exactly what Caesar had predicted. She demanded an immediate meeting, claiming she deserved half of everything after 16 years of marriage. Her performance was masterful. Tears, accusations of abandonment, claims that she'd sacrificed her career for his military service. "I've given you the best years of my life," she sobbed in the lawyer's office. "While you were playing soldier, I was raising our daughters alone. I deserve to be taken care of." But Caesar noticed what Miranda didn't: the federal agents photographing everyone who entered the building. Stuart Ibarra, watching from across the street. The surveillance team that had been tracking Miranda's every movement for weeks. The custody battle became Miranda's second tactical error. In demanding full custody of Eleanor and Vivian, she opened her financial records to court scrutiny. The judge would see the mysterious bank accounts, the unexplained income, the shell company payments. More importantly, it gave Caesar legal grounds to present evidence of Miranda's activities to protect his daughters from a compromised parent. Caesar's daughters presented the most complex challenge. Eleanor and Vivian had been traumatized by months of secrets and lies. They knew something was wrong, but didn't understand the scope of their mother's betrayal. Caesar couldn't expose them to the full truth, but he needed their testimony to establish the timeline of Stuart's presence in their lives. The solution came through Dr. Rachel Mayo, a military family counselor who specialized in helping children of deployed soldiers. Under the guise of helping the girls adjust to their father's return, Dr. Mayo conducted interviews that documented their emotional state, their knowledge of Stuart, and their awareness of their mother's deception. The sessions revealed the depth of psychological manipulation Miranda had employed. She told the girls their father didn't love them anymore, that his military service was more important than family, that Stuart was a friend helping while Daddy was away. Eleanor, the more perceptive twin, had begun to suspect Stuart was more than a friend. She'd caught them kissing, had overheard phone conversations in languages she didn't recognize, had seen her mother photographing her father's documents. Vivian, more trusting and innocent, had accepted her mother's explanations but internalized guilt about keeping secrets from her father. The anxiety attacks weren't random. They coincided with her mother's transmission schedules, when the stress of maintaining lies became overwhelming. Both girls, Dr. Mayo reported, showed signs of chronic stress consistent with living in a household engaged in covert activities. They'd been used as unwitting assets in an intelligence operation targeting their own father. The final element of Caesar's plan required the most delicate timing. He needed Miranda and Stuart to believe they were in control, that their operation was succeeding, right up until the moment federal agents surrounded them. 3 days before the divorce hearing, Caesar fed Miranda information about a classified deployment to Eastern Europe. The intelligence was partially accurate, enough to seem valuable to her foreign contacts, but altered in ways that would expose anyone who acted on it. Miranda transmitted the information that same evening. Federal surveillance teams tracked the communication to a safe house in Richmond, where Stuart was coordinating with his actual handlers. The intelligence was immediately forwarded to enemy operatives who began planning operations based on false information. When they acted, they would expose the entire network. But Caesar's masterstroke was yet to come. He'd arranged for the divorce hearing to take place in Judge Cameron Evans's courtroom, a military veteran who'd served 3 tours in Vietnam and had zero tolerance for attacks against American soldiers. The stage was set. The players were in position. All that remained was the final act of a revenge that had been years in the making. Miranda believed she was about to claim her victory in divorce court. Stewart believed their intelligence operation remained undetected. Both were about to learn why Caesar Chamberlain had never lost a battle, whether on foreign soil or in his own home. The reckoning was at hand. Chapter 4. The Gathering Storm. Judge Cameron Evans reviewed the divorce filing with the methodical precision of a military officer examining battle plans. At 72, the retired Marine colonel had seen every form of human deception in both war and civil court. But the case of Chamberlain versus Blackwell promised to be more complex than the usual division of assets. Miranda entered the courtroom wearing her most conservative dress, playing the role of abandoned military wife to perfection. Her lawyer, a sharp woman named Kristen Lord, had built a reputation representing military spouses in high-stakes divorces. They'd prepared their strategy carefully. Paint Caesar as an absent father who'd chosen military service over family, emphasize Miranda's sacrifices, and demand substantial alimony as compensation for 16 years of single parenting. Stewart Ibarra sat in the gallery, positioned to provide emotional support, while maintaining the fiction that he was merely a concerned friend. His presence was calculated, close enough to demonstrate Miranda's emotional needs, distant enough to avoid appearing romantic. Caesar arrived alone, carrying only a single briefcase. His military bearing was unmistakable, ramrod-straight posture, alert eyes that cataloged every person in the courtroom, the controlled stillness of someone accustomed to life-or-death decisions. Miranda's lawyer had warned her that military men often intimidated in court, but she seemed genuinely unsettled by her husband's cold composure. The proceedings began routinely. Miranda's lawyer presented their case with theatrical precision, a devoted wife abandoned by a husband who valued military glory over family responsibility. Financial documents showed Miranda managing household expenses alone for months at a time. School records revealed her attending parent-teacher conferences without Caesar. Medical records showed her handling the girls' health care needs independently. "Your Honor," Kristen Lord declared, "my client has sacrificed her own career aspirations, her personal fulfillment, and her emotional well-being to support a husband who chose military service over family obligations. She deserves significant alimony to compensate for these sacrifices and to maintain the standard of living she established during the marriage." Miranda took the witness stand with practiced composure. Her testimony was carefully crafted. She'd married young, supported Caesar through his military career, raised their daughters during his repeated deployments, and maintained their home despite prolonged separations. "I gave up everything for his career," she testified, dabbing her eyes with practiced precision. "I've been essentially a single mother for 12 years, managing everything while he pursued his military ambitions. Now that he's finally home, he wants to abandon the family I've held together." The performance was masterful, but Caesar noticed the tells, micro-expressions that betrayed Miranda's true emotional state. She wasn't grieving a lost marriage. She was calculating her financial gain. When she mentioned the girls, her eyes flickered towards Stewart in the gallery. When she discussed sacrifice, her hand touched the expensive jewelry that hadn't existed before his deployments. Judge Evans listened without visible reaction, occasionally making notes in careful handwriting. His questions were precise, focusing on specific dates and financial details that seemed routine but were actually establishing a timeline that would prove crucial. When Miranda's direct examination concluded, her lawyer turned to Caesar with obvious confidence. "Your Honor, I believe the evidence clearly supports my client's request for substantial monthly alimony. $8,000 is hardly excessive compensation for 16 years of sacrifice and single parenting." The courtroom fell silent as Judge Evans reviewed his notes. Miranda smiled slightly, believing her performance had secured victory. Stuart Ibarra shifted forward in his seat, ready to provide emotional support during what they assumed would be Caesar's humiliating defeat. But Caesar remained absolutely still, his expression unreadable. He'd spent the entire proceeding in calculated silence, letting Miranda build her case while she unknowingly provided testimony that would destroy her completely. Judge Evans looked up from his notes. "Major Chamberlain, do you wish to respond to your wife's request for alimony?" For the first time since entering the courtroom, Caesar moved. He stood with military precision, opened his briefcase, and withdrew a single document. "Your Honor, I have evidence that changes the nature of these proceedings completely." Miranda's confident expression flickered. This wasn't part of the script she'd prepared. Her lawyer leaned forward, suddenly alert to a shift in courtroom dynamics she hadn't anticipated. Caesar approached the bench and handed Judge Evans the document. As the judge's eyes moved across the page, his expression transformed from professional neutrality to shocked recognition. "Marshal," Judge Evans commanded, his voice cutting through the courtroom's silence like a blade, "lock down this courtroom immediately." The words hit Miranda like a physical blow. Her lawyer's papers scattered as she jerked backward in confusion. Stuart Ibarra half rose from his seat, suddenly aware that something had gone catastrophically wrong. United States Marshals appeared from multiple entrances, their presence coordinated with military precision. The courtroom doors sealed with audible finality. Every exit was blocked by armed federal agents. Miranda's face had drained of all color. Her carefully constructed performance crumbled as she realized that her husband, the man she'd been systematically betraying for years, had orchestrated something far beyond a simple divorce proceeding. Judge Evans studied the document again, his military training evident in the way he processed shocking intelligence without losing composure. When he looked up, his eyes found Miranda with laser focus. "Mrs. Blackwell," he said, using her maiden name with deliberate emphasis, "you are under federal investigation for espionage activities against the United States of America." The courtroom erupted. Miranda's lawyer demanded explanations. Stuart Ibarra was already surrounded by federal agents, his hands being secured behind his back. Gallery observers pressed against the sealed doors, trying to understand why a routine divorce hearing had transformed into a federal arrest operation. But Caesar remained perfectly still, watching his wife's world collapse with the same cold precision he'd applied to interrogating terrorists in black sites across 3 continents. The reckoning had finally begun. Chapter 5. The Web Unravels. The single document that changed everything was a federal surveillance warrant, signed by 3 different agencies and authorized by a FISA court judge. It detailed a 2-year investigation into foreign intelligence operations targeting military families in the Fayetteville area, with Miranda Blackwell and Stuart Ibarra identified as primary subjects. As federal agents secure the courtroom, Prosecutor Armando Ortega entered with a team of military intelligence officers. His presence transformed the divorce hearing into a preliminary espionage tribunal, with Judge Evans maintaining jurisdiction due to the military nature of the charges. "Your Honor," Ortega announced, "the subjects under surveillance have been transmitting classified military intelligence to foreign operatives for approximately 24 months. We have recordings, financial evidence, and documented communications that constitute acts of treason against the United States." Miranda's composure finally shattered completely. "This is insane," she screamed, rising from the witness stand. "I don't know what you're talking about. Caesar, tell them this is crazy." But Caesar's expression remained impassive as Agent Charlie Lyon, lead investigator for the Defense Intelligence Agency, began presenting evidence on a mobile screen system. The first exhibits were audio recordings from Miranda's own home, conversations between her and Stuart discussing transmission schedules, photographic techniques for classified documents, and payments from foreign sources. Miranda's voice was clearly identifiable as she described which of Caesar's files contained the most valuable intelligence. "The deployment schedules are worth $20,000, Miranda's recorded voice explained to Stuart. But if I can get his operational plans, they'll pay 50. The audio continued with Stewart's response. Your husband's security clearance gives us access to information my contacts have wanted for years. Keep photographing everything in his office. They're particularly interested in special operations assignments. Miranda's face went ashen as her own voice filled the courtroom, methodically discussing the sale of military secrets like grocery shopping. Her lawyer sat in stunned silence, realizing her client had been using their attorney-client meetings to plan espionage activities. The financial evidence was equally damning. Agent Lyon displayed bank records showing deposits from shell companies traced to foreign intelligence services. Miranda had received over $300,000 during Caesar's last deployment, payment for information that had compromised multiple military operations. Mrs. Blackwell established 4 separate accounts using her maiden name, Agent Lyon testified. Each account received regular deposits corresponding to intelligence transmissions from her home. Mr. Ibarra served as her handler, coordinating communications with foreign operatives. But the most devastating evidence was yet to come. Agent Lyon activated a video system that showed recorded footage from inside Caesar's own home office. Miranda systematically photographing classified documents, Stewart operating sophisticated transmission equipment, and both of them discussing which intelligence would command the highest prices. The recordings spanned 18 months, capturing hundreds of instances of espionage activity. Miranda had been selling her husband's military secrets during their entire marriage, using his deployments as opportunities to access classified materials. Judge Evans studied each piece of evidence with growing disgust. As a combat veteran, he understood the implications of compromised intelligence, soldiers killed, operations exposed, national security damaged by 2 people motivated by greed and foreign manipulation. Mrs. Blackwell, Judge Evans addressed Miranda directly. The evidence indicates you've been operating as a foreign intelligence asset throughout your marriage to a serving military officer. Do you understand the gravity of these charges? Miranda tried one final deception. I was forced into this. Stewart threatened me. He said he'd hurt the girls if I didn't cooperate. But Agent Lyon immediately displayed recorded conversations proving Miranda had initiated contact with foreign intelligence services, had volunteered classified information, and had been the driving force behind expanding the operation. The communications clearly show Mrs. Blackwell as the primary asset, Agent Lyon testified. She recruited Mr. Ibarra, established the financial arrangements, and provided operational security for the intelligence gathering. This was not coercion. This was voluntary treason. Stewart Ibarra, now formally under arrest, attempted his own defense. I was conducting a counterintelligence operation. I was trying to identify foreign agents by infiltrating their network. The lie was immediately exposed when Agent Lyon presented Stewart's actual military record. Discharge for selling ammunition to civilian buyers, multiple arrests for fraud, and documented connections to foreign nationals under federal surveillance. As the evidence mounted, the true scope of the betrayal became clear. Miranda hadn't just cheated on her husband. She'd systematically sold American military secret for profit, used their daughters as cover for espionage activities, and turned their family home into a foreign intelligence operations center. The operation had been so successful that foreign services had begun targeting other military families in the area, using Miranda and Stewart's methods as a template for expanding their intelligence gathering. Judge Evans reviewed the final exhibits with visible anger. Major Chamberlain, he said, addressing Caesar directly, how long have you been aware of these activities? For the first time since the hearing began, Caesar spoke. His voice was steady, controlled, and filled with cold fury. I suspected foreign surveillance during my last deployment, Your Honor. When I returned home, I identified operational security breaches that could only have originated from inside my household. I initiated counterintelligence protocols and discovered that my wife had been selling classified information throughout our marriage. The statement was delivered with military precision, but everyone in the courtroom could hear the underlying rage. The betrayal by the person he'd trusted most, the use of his daughters as intelligence assets, the systematic destruction of everything he'd fought to protect. Miranda finally understood the scope of her husband's response. This wasn't a divorce proceeding that had accidentally uncovered espionage. This was a carefully orchestrated counterintelligence operation designed to expose and destroy her completely. Caesar had never intended to simply divorce her. He'd planned her complete annihilation. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. The realization that struck Miranda like a physical blow was that every move she'd made for months had been anticipated, monitored, and turned against her. The classified documents she'd photographed were deliberately planted disinformation. The financial transactions she'd conducted were being tracked by federal agencies. Even her transmission schedules had been compromised and used to identify her foreign contacts. Agent Lyon continued presenting evidence, but now the focus shifted to demonstrate the sophisticated counterintelligence operation Caesar had conducted against his own wife. Major Chamberlain provided crucial assistance in exposing this espionage network, Agent Lyon testified. His cooperation allowed us to identify foreign operatives, trace financial networks, and document intelligence compromises spanning multiple military installations. The video evidence showed Miranda's activities from different angles. Not just her photographing documents, but federal surveillance teams recording her activities, tracking her movements, and identifying every person in her network. Stuart Ibarra's arrest had been equally choreographed. Federal agents had been monitoring his communications for weeks, allowing him to believe his operations remained secure while documenting every contact with foreign handlers. Judge Evans reviewed transcripts of intercepted communications between Stuart and his overseas contacts. The conversations revealed the true scope of their intelligence gathering. Not just Caesar's assignments, but information about other military families, base security procedures, and operational details that had compromised American forces overseas. Your Honor, Prosecutor Ortega announced, the intelligence sold by Mrs. Blackwell and Mr. Ibarra directly contributed to hostile actions against American military personnel. We have documented instances where operational security was compromised, resulting in casualties among serving soldiers. The statement hung in the courtroom air like an accusation of murder. Miranda had not only betrayed her husband, she contributed to American soldiers being killed or wounded by enemies who'd received advance warning of military operations. Miranda's lawyer, Kristen Lord, attempted damage control. Your Honor, my client clearly needs psychiatric evaluation. The stress of military marriage, the isolation during deployments, the pressure of single parenting, these factors could explain aberrant behavior that doesn't reflect her true character. But Agent Lyon immediately countered with psychiatric evaluations that had been conducted during the surveillance period. Miranda showed no signs of mental illness, coercion, or diminished capacity. Her actions were deliberate, calculated, and motivated by financial gain. Mrs. Blackwell demonstrated sophisticated operational security, Agent Lyon testified. She used encryption software, established dead drops for document transfers, and coordinated complex communication schedules. These actions required advanced planning and clear understanding of intelligence gathering techniques. The evaluation had also revealed Miranda's true opinion of her husband and daughters. Recorded conversations showed her referring to Caesar as useful but expendable and describing the girls as convenient cover for operations. Eleanor and Vivian weren't just caught in the middle of their parents' divorce. They've been systematically used as assets in an operation targeting their own father. Judge Evans called for a brief recess, during which federal agents formally arrested Miranda on charges of espionage, treason, and conspiracy against the United States. As handcuffs were applied, she made one final appeal to her husband. Caesar, please, think about the girls. They need their mother. For the first time since the hearing began, emotion flickered across Caesar's face. Not sympathy, but pure rage. The girls needed protection from their mother, he replied with icy precision. You used them as cover while you sold intelligence that got American soldiers killed. You forfeited any claim to be their parent. When proceedings resumed, the focus shifted to the custody and financial aspects of the case, but now with complete context of Miranda's criminal activities. Dr. Rachel Mayo testified about Eleanor and Vivian's psychological state, describing how they'd been manipulated into maintaining secrets, pressured to lie about Stuart's presence, and traumatized by their mother's deceptive behavior. Both children show signs of chronic stress, consistent with living in a household engaged in covert activities, Dr. Mayo testified. They've been used as unwitting assets in an intelligence operation, causing significant psychological damage. The financial evidence revealed the scope of Miranda's betrayal in stark numbers. She'd received over $500,000 from foreign sources, money that had been used to fund a lifestyle far beyond what Caesar's military salary could support. But the most damaging testimony came from Eleanor herself. At 16, she was old enough to testify about what she'd witnessed, and her words destroyed any remaining sympathy for her mother. She told us Dad didn't love us anymore, Eleanor testified, her voice steady despite visible tears. She said he cared more about the army than his family. But she was the one with secrets. She was the one making us lie. Eleanor described finding strange equipment in their basement, overhearing conversations in foreign languages, and watching her mother photograph documents from her father's office. She'd known something was wrong, but had been threatened with losing both parents if she spoke up. She said if we told anyone about Stuart, Dad would go to prison and we'd lose our family. Eleanor continued. But she was the one destroying our family. The testimony revealed that Miranda had psychologically manipulated her own daughters, using their love for their father as leverage to maintain operational security. When Eleanor finished testifying, Judge Evans's expression showed barely controlled fury. Miranda had not only committed treason, she'd emotionally abused her children to cover her crimes. The divorce hearing was now concluded, but the criminal proceedings were just beginning. As federal agents prepared to transport Miranda and Stuart to holding facilities, Judge Evans delivered his preliminary rulings. Mrs. Blackwell, you have systematically betrayed your country, your family, and your children. You will have no contact with Eleanor and Vivian Chamberlain, no claim to any marital assets, and no consideration for alimony. Major Chamberlain will receive full custody and complete control of all family resources. But Caesar's revenge was far from complete. The courtroom proceedings had been only the first phase of a much more comprehensive destruction. Chapter 7. The Reckoning begins. 3 months after the courtroom arrests, Miranda Blackwell sat in a federal holding facility awaiting trial for espionage, treason, and conspiracy against the United States. Her bail had been denied due to flight risk and the severity of charges that could result in life imprisonment or execution. But Caesar's revenge extended far beyond the criminal justice system. He'd spent his career learning that complete victory required destroying an enemy's will to fight, their resources, their support networks, and their hope of recovery. Miranda's sister Charlotte Casey had initially offered emotional support until federal agents presented her with evidence of Miranda's activities. The recorded conversations included Miranda discussing which family members might be useful for expanding intelligence operations, with Charlotte specifically mentioned as a potential asset due to her work with a defense contractor. She was planning to recruit me, Charlotte told Caesar during a tense meeting at her Raleigh home. She asked detailed questions about my work, my access to company systems, my financial situation. I thought she was just being sisterly. The revelation shattered Charlotte's family loyalty. Miranda had been assessing her own sister for recruitment into a foreign espionage network. Charlotte immediately cut all contact and refused to provide character testimony for Miranda's defense. Stuart Ibarra faced his own systematic destruction. Federal investigations revealed he'd been operating similar schemes against 3 other military families, using the same seduction and manipulation tactics that had worked on Miranda. His foreign handlers had paid him over $2 million during a 5-year period, money that was now frozen by federal asset forfeiture. But Caesar had ensured Stuart's punishment extended beyond legal consequences. Military records from Stuart's discharge were leaked to his extended family, revealing he'd been selling military equipment and ammunition to civilian buyers. His brother Armando Ortega, ironically the same prosecutor now handling espionage cases, publicly disowned Stewart and testified against him in federal proceedings. "My brother is a disgrace to our family and our country," Armando stated in court documents. "I request he never be allowed to use our family name again." The psychological warfare against both targets was relentless. Federal investigators revealed that the Foreign Intelligence Service had been planning to eliminate both Miranda and Stewart once their usefulness ended. Intercepted communications showed their handlers discussing retirement protocols that would have resulted in both Americans disappearing permanently. Miranda learned that her romantic relationship with Stewart had been entirely fabricated. He'd been following intelligence service instructions to seduce and control her, with recorded conversations revealing his true opinion of her as useful but pathetic. "She's desperate for attention and validation," Stewart had told his handlers. American military wives are easy targets because they're isolated and resentful. Miranda will do anything for money and emotional manipulation. The recordings crushed Miranda's remaining illusions about their relationship. She betrayed her family for a man who viewed her as nothing more than a useful tool. Eleanor and Vivian were receiving intensive counseling to address the psychological damage from their mother's manipulation, but both girls had made clear they never wanted contact with Miranda again. "She used us," Vivian told Dr. Rachel Mayo during a family session. "Every hug, every conversation about Dad being away. She was using us to make her lies seem normal." Eleanor was even more direct. "I don't have a mother anymore. Mothers protect their children. She put us in danger to help enemies of our country." The girls had been moved to a new school district and were living under enhanced security protocols due to potential retaliation from foreign intelligence services. Their childhood had been destroyed by their mother's choices, but they were determined to rebuild their lives without her influence. Caesar arranged for both girls to testify at Miranda's sentencing hearing, ensuring the judge understood the full impact of her crimes on her own children. The financial destruction was equally comprehensive. Every asset Miranda had purchased with espionage money was seized by federal authorities. The house she'd planned to keep in the divorce was forfeited as proceeds of criminal activity. Bank accounts were frozen and contents transferred to a victim compensation fund. Miranda's defense attorney, Kristen Lord, found herself under investigation for inadvertently facilitating communications between Miranda and her foreign contacts. Legal documents had been used to pass coded messages, with Miranda's divorce strategy actually serving as cover for continued intelligence operations. The realization that she'd been unknowingly participating in espionage activities destroyed Kristen's legal career and resulted in her facing potential conspiracy charges. But Caesar's most ruthless move involved Miranda's foreign handlers themselves. The counterintelligence operation had identified the entire network, including operatives in 3 different countries. American intelligence services began systematically exposing these agents to their own governments, resulting in arrests, executions, and the complete collapse of a foreign intelligence network that had taken years to establish. The Foreign Service that had recruited Miranda discovered too late that they'd been infiltrated and manipulated by one of America's most effective special operations officers. Their attempt to exploit a military family had resulted in the destruction of their entire North American intelligence apparatus. Miranda learned about these consequences during interrogation sessions designed to extract information about any remaining foreign contacts. Federal agents made sure she understood that her cooperation had resulted in the deaths or imprisonment of everyone who'd been involved in recruiting her. "Your friends aren't coming to help you," Agent Charlie Lyon informed her during one session. "They're either dead or in foreign prisons, and their governments are very unhappy about the intelligence failures you caused." The psychological impact was devastating. Miranda realized she'd been manipulated by professionals who'd never valued her as anything more than a disposable asset. Her betrayal of her family had gained her nothing but isolation, criminal charges, and the knowledge that she'd been used and discarded by people who held her in contempt. But Caesar's revenge was still building toward its final, most devastating phase. Chapter 8: Complete Annihilation. The trial of Miranda Blackwell and Stuart Ibarra became a national security showcase, with federal prosecutors using the case to demonstrate American resolve against foreign intelligence operations targeting military families. Media coverage was carefully controlled, but enough details emerged to destroy both defendants' reputations completely. Caesar testified as the government's primary witness, his military bearing and precise testimony creating a stark contrast to the defendant's obvious guilt. His account of discovering the espionage operation, the systematic betrayal of his trust, and the psychological manipulation of his children generated public sympathy from military families and outrage against foreign intelligence activities. Major Chamberlain represents the best of American military service. Prosecutor Armando Ortega told the jury. He served his country with distinction while his wife sold his service record to America's enemies. This case demonstrates why we must protect our military families from foreign manipulation. Miranda's defense strategy collapsed when federal investigators revealed additional evidence of her activities. Phone records showed she'd been in contact with foreign operatives for over 4 years, beginning long before Stewart's appearance in her life. She hadn't been seduced into espionage. She'd been an active recruiter seeking foreign contacts willing to pay for military intelligence. The timeline proved that Miranda had initiated the espionage operation during Caesar's second deployment, using his absence to establish relationships with foreign intelligence services. Stewart had been brought in later to provide operational support and security for her activities. Eleanor and Vivian's testimony devastated Miranda's remaining credibility. Both girls described years of manipulation, lies, and emotional abuse designed to maintain operational security. Their mother had used their love for their father as a weapon against their entire family. She told us Dad was a killer who enjoyed hurting people overseas, Eleanor testified. She said the army made him dangerous and that we should be afraid of him. But she was the one who was dangerous. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Miranda faced life imprisonment without parole for treason. Stewart received a similar sentence for espionage and conspiracy, but sentencing wouldn't occur for several months, giving Caesar time to implement the final phase of his revenge. The media attention had attracted international notice, with foreign intelligence services learning that their North American operations had been completely compromised. Miranda and Stewart's handlers began eliminating anyone who might have knowledge of the failed operation, including family members who'd been unaware of the espionage activities. Stewart's estranged wife, Kelly Minor, was found dead in an apparent robbery that federal investigators recognized as an assassination. His teenage son, Kerry Pierce, disappeared while walking home from school and was never found. The Foreign Intelligence Service was eliminating potential witnesses and sending a message about the consequences of operational failures. Miranda learned about these murders during a final interrogation session, where Agent Lyon explained the international consequences of her activities. "Your foreign friends are cleaning house," he informed her. "Everyone connected to your operation is being eliminated. Your recruitment of other military wives got those women killed. Their children are missing or dead. This is what you accomplished with your treason." The psychological impact was devastating. Miranda realized that her desire for money and attention had resulted in the deaths of innocent people, including children who'd been used as leverage against their mothers. But Caesar's most ruthless revenge was yet to be revealed. During the sentencing phase, federal prosecutors introduced evidence that Miranda's espionage activities had directly contributed to a terrorist attack against American forces in Afghanistan. Intelligence she'd sold had been used to plan an ambush that killed 7 American soldiers and wounded 15 others. The families of those soldiers attended the sentencing hearing, with some addressing Miranda directly about the impact of her betrayal. "My son died because you sold his patrol route to terrorists," one mother told Miranda. "He was 22 years old, serving his country, and you helped his enemies kill him for money." The testimony continued for hours, with family members of the dead and wounded soldiers describing how Miranda's greed had destroyed their lives. She hadn't just betrayed her husband, she'd participated in the murder of American soldiers. Judge Evans listened to every statement before delivering Miranda's sentence. His words were measured, but filled with barely controlled fury. "Mrs. Blackwell, you have committed the most serious crimes possible against your country and your family. You sold military intelligence that resulted in American deaths. You manipulated your own children to maintain operational security. You betrayed every trust placed in you as a military spouse and American citizen." The sentence was life imprisonment without possibility of parole, to be served in the highest security federal facility available. Miranda would spend the rest of her life in solitary confinement, with no contact with family members or former associates. Stuart Ibarra received an identical sentence, but with an additional stipulation that he be held in a facility known for housing the most dangerous foreign agents and terrorists. As both defendants were led away in shackles, Caesar felt no satisfaction, only cold completion of a necessary task. His enemies had been identified, exposed, and destroyed. Justice had been delivered with military precision. But the revenge wasn't complete until every consequence had played out completely. Chapter 9. The Final Victory. 1 year after the sentencing, the full scope of Caesar's revenge had become clear to everyone who'd been touched by Miranda's betrayal. The systematic destruction of her life, her associates, and her foreign network had been so comprehensive that it became a case study in military intelligence schools. Miranda Blackwell spent her days in administrative segregation at ADX Florence, the supermax federal prison reserved for terrorists and traitors. Her cell was a concrete box with a slot for food delivery and a small window that showed only a concrete wall. She was allowed 1 hour of exercise daily in a slightly larger concrete cage, with no human contact except for guards who spoke to her only to deliver necessary instructions. The psychological isolation was devastating. Miranda had been a social manipulator who thrived on attention and emotional control. Solitary confinement for life meant she would never again have the opportunity to manipulate, seduce, or betray anyone. Letters from family members were refused delivery. Phone calls were denied. Visitors were prohibited under national security restrictions. Miranda would spend decades thinking about her choices, with nothing but concrete walls and her own guilt for company. Stuart Ibarra faced similar conditions, but with the additional knowledge that his foreign handlers had eliminated his entire family to prevent potential intelligence leaks. His wife, son, parents, and siblings had all been murdered by the same people who'd recruited him. His betrayal of America had resulted in the destruction of everyone he'd ever loved. The foreign intelligence network that had recruited them was completely eliminated. American counterintelligence operations, using information provided by Miranda and Stewart's failed operation, had identified and neutralized similar espionage cells across 3 continents. The attempt to exploit American military families had backfired catastrophically, resulting in the exposure and destruction of intelligence networks that had taken decades to establish. Caesar received commendations from the Pentagon, CIA, and NSA for his role in the counterintelligence operation. His decision to investigate his wife's activities had prevented additional espionage operations and protected countless military families from similar exploitation. But the personal victory was more important than professional recognition. Eleanor and Vivian Chamberlain had recovered from their psychological trauma and were thriving in their new environment. Both girls had been accepted to military academies, choosing to follow their father's example of service rather than their mother's path of betrayal. "We want to honor the soldiers our mother helped kill," Eleanor explained during a family interview. "Dad showed us what real loyalty means. We'll spend our lives protecting the country she tried to destroy." The girls had legally changed their names to remove any connection to their mother's family. They were now Eleanor Chamberlain and Vivian Chamberlain, proud daughters of a decorated military officer and ashamed of nothing in their past. Caesar had been promoted to lieutenant colonel and assigned to train other military personnel in counterintelligence techniques. His experience identifying and neutralizing a domestic espionage operation made him invaluable for protecting other military families from similar threats. The house where Miranda had conducted her espionage operations was demolished, and the land, donated to a foundation supporting families of soldiers killed in action. A memorial garden was planted on the site, with plaques honoring the 7 soldiers who died because of intelligence Miranda had sold to terrorists. Every trace of Miranda's existence had been systematically erased. Her name was removed from official records where possible. Her photographs were destroyed. Her belongings were incinerated as contaminated materials. She had become a non-person, existing only in federal prison records and classified intelligence files. The custody and financial aspects of the divorce were resolved in Caesar's favor completely. He received full custody of both daughters, complete control of all marital assets, and legal protection from any future claims by Miranda or her associates. More importantly, the federal government established new protocols for protecting military families from foreign intelligence operations, using the Blackwell case as a template for identifying and countering similar threats. Caesar's reputation within the military community reached legendary status. He'd identified a domestic espionage operation, neutralized foreign intelligence networks, and protected American soldiers from further betrayal. His name was spoken with the same reverence reserved for the most decorated combat veterans. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of his victory was the knowledge that Miranda would spend the rest of her life understanding exactly what she'd lost. In her concrete cell, with nothing but time to think, Miranda could contemplate the full consequences of her choices. She'd traded a loving family, financial security, and social respect for money from people who'd always planned to eliminate her once she was no longer useful. She'd betrayed a husband who'd loved her completely, damaged daughters who'd trusted her absolutely, and contributed to the deaths of soldiers who'd been serving their country honorably. Her desire for attention and financial gain had resulted in the destruction of everything she'd ever valued. The Foreign Intelligence Service that had recruited her had been completely eliminated. Stewart, the man she'd thought loved her, had been using her according to professional instructions and had never felt genuine emotion for her. Her family had disowned her completely. Her children would never speak to her again. She would die in prison, alone and forgotten, having accomplished nothing except demonstrating why treason against the United States carries the harshest possible penalties. Caesar Chamberlain had achieved complete victory. His enemies were destroyed, his family was protected, and his country was safer because of his actions. He'd proven that betrayal of an American soldier, especially by someone trusted with his love and loyalty, would result in systematic, comprehensive, and permanent consequences. The lesson was clear. Major Caesar Chamberlain never forgave, never forgot, and never failed to destroy those who betrayed him. His revenge was complete, his victory absolute, and his enemies erased from history. The war was over. Caesar had won.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.